That should fix it. Yep. Yeah, I love it. Anyway, we're good. If you're listening on the podcast, you heard everything that I said. If you're listening on Twitch, you did not. Sorry about that. Anyway, my OBS loves to forget that I have a condenser mic. Straight up, it does. Like sometimes it'll be like, oh, condenser mic, and then it won't, and then it'll forget when I change something on like the desktop audio, and it completely figures out. So shout out to Kevin, Quick Kevin, by the way. Hardest working man in Quidditch right now. Shout out to Kevin for being in the Twitch chat and telling me that I was mic muted. Anyway, shout out to everybody who is also listening to the podcast. What was I saying? I was talking about football. Yes, we got 2 questions. We got one from Twitter at FB_Playboy. We got one from Instagram at The Aston Forever, and I was explaining what Monday Moments are. Monday Moments is where I take things from my burner account, The Mood of Sports is what it's called. Don't follow it. Like legitimately, I got like 10 follows this past week on that Instagram account for some reason. I'm assuming they were all bots. I haven't posted from that account in like a year. But I have a burner account where I follow like every professional athlete that I possibly can, like literally from all over the world of sports, volleyball players, professional hockey players, college volleyball players. I follow photographers that shoot photos from the high school level on up, all that kind of stuff like that. And in particular, I follow all of the NFL photographers who work for each of the individual teams, or as many of them as I possibly can. And I take their photos and I add them to my Instagram story just because I like sports photography. So I wanted to be like, hey, look at this really cool photo. And I actually have a TikTok where I do like image of the week. I already picked what image of the week is. Don't tell anyone. But I didn't watch I saw what came out of Monday Night Football. None of it was like over the top amazing. I will check again on Instagram. But the image of the week that I have makes Lamar Jackson look like a superhero. Straight up. I don't know how they got it, but shout out to Sean Hubbard. He got image of the week and it wasn't even close. So we move on. We got our question here. This is from Alejo. Who you got in the AFC North now that the entire division is 1-1? So that's oh man. So Alejo coming in with the hard hitting questions off the top, and I'll try to not make this too nuanced. And let me make sure that I have it. There we go. So Alejo is asking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens, the Bengals, and the Browns, right, in their division. He's asking, who do I think will win? By the way, I think, what is it? There's one division where everybody... no, never mind. It got broken up after week 1. By the way, the stats that people are putting out after 2 weeks are hilarious. Just absurd things. It's 2 weeks into the season, guys. Anyway... So we saw the Bengals play this past weekend versus the Bears. We saw the Browns play versus the Houston Texans in a game that was clearly tanked. The Steelers and the Ravens. So the most complete team out of these 4 teams that are here are the Ravens. The team that has the most likelihood to be able to win the division, though, seems to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've weaseled their way out of losing. In week 1 versus the Bills. But now reports are coming out. Report came out earlier today. Ben Roethlisberger's now hurt. So obviously the guy who sucked when he was 100% healthy is going to get better in some way, shape, or form now that he's hurt, in particular with his pectoral muscle. So I'll put my money right now on the Baltimore Ravens. They seem to have rebounded and worked around their injuries very, very well. They actually had an injury that helped improve their offensive line. I don't know if people caught that. So Alejandro Villanueva, who played pretty poorly in week 1 by all metrics of the people who like watch offensive line play. And I used to play offensive line in college, but I wasn't very good. So you shouldn't take my opinion when it comes in offensive line play and stuff like that. But the Baltimore Ravens run blocking was pretty on point. There was a lot of decisions that were made versus the Chiefs defense that were a struggle. I just got a notification. Apparently there's a fire at the Superdome in New Orleans. Trying not to open that notification live on the podcast, but I'll look at it afterwards. But the Ravens look like the best team in the AFC North because they are actually the most complete team in the AFC North. I would believe that the Browns would be legitimate contenders, and then the Steelers after that. So, like, if I had to pick a team that wasn't going to make the playoffs, out of those 3 teams, because I still don't think the Bengals are anywhere near close where they need to be. They've played very, very well, mind you, but they have not played consistently across the board. They're also still giving up a shit ton of pressure, which means that Joe Burrow his knee is still very much in danger on a regular basis. But the Browns, this past week, they ran the ball really hard. They played they played some really good defense in the second half of that game against a rookie quarterback. So they definitely came down to earth after going blow for blow with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll go with the Ravens. I'll throw my lot in with the Ravens finally winning the AFC North. Well, that would be the second time in 4 years, right? Second time in 4 years they would win the AFC North. So I'll pick the Ravens to go off this one just because I like the fact that they have the ability to control and win in chaos. When things go horribly wrong on offense, they have players and a quarterback who can find a way to win, and I'll take that over a statue like Ben Roethlisberger any day. The AFC West and the NFC West are the top two teams in the NFL, which great point. Top two divisions in the NFL. Many could argue the NFC South, but that's a discussion for another day. And Andrew wrote this in, and he says he doesn't think any team from either one of those divisions will make the Super Bowl. So just to be clear, when we talk about the AFC West, we're talking about obviously it's the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders in that division. All those teams have looked really good. They're the only division where every team has a win in the NFL right now. Well, except the AFC North. So they have two teams. The Broncos are 2-0, the Raiders are 2-0, and then the Chiefs are 1-1 after taking that week one. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, because they lost to the Ravens. Things are starting to blur together already. The Chargers are 1-1 overall on the season. So that being said, these teams combining together are easily one of the most the nicest collection of elite teams. I think the NFC West is obviously better. I'm a Seahawks fan for sure. Combine that with the Cardinals having potentially the MVP of the season, depending upon if he can maintain the absolutely absurd things he's been able to do. The Rams games as well. The 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks combined together make the best division in all of football, and it keeps being proven. We're 2 weeks into the season, and they already look like that it's unfair that they can't have all four of these teams go to the playoffs. But yeah, he thinks that none of those teams that I just listed will actually make it to the Super Bowl. As a person who does not have a Super Bowl pick or a team that I think is a contender for the Super Bowl, because I come into every season actually with the ability and willingness to wait and see in terms of how well teams are playing, I will agree with you, Andrew. I don't know who's going to win the Super Bowl, but to sit here and say that these teams, whoever wins this division, is not the best team in football, it's hard to sell. Whoever wins the NFC West, to try and say that they're not the best team in football is going to be a hard sell. But the fact of the matter is, we know for a fact the playoff system does not decide who the best team in the league is. The playoff system decides who's the best team in the playoffs. So, that being said, I'd have to say, I would agree with you, man, especially considering only, two teams, well, potentially three teams out of each one of these divisions can make it to the playoffs, make it to the playoffs, and then out of those, they have to be able to make it to the Super Bowl. And if two of those teams out of the NFC West make the playoffs, there's a high likelihood that they end up playing each other, I believe, is the way that gets set up. But never mind. That's a discussion about seeding, and we're not doing that in week 2. We're not doing playoff seeding discussion in week 2. So, Andrew and Alejo, thank you for writing into the show, and I'll make sure to post all the question tweets and all that kind of stuff next week so more people can write into the show and we can answer their questions. So we move on. Talk about week 2 of the NFL season, checking the chat on Twitch, and it looks like Quid Kevin says he has a work meeting later. I have work later, just like work in general. I have work at 2 o'clock, but I need to leave here in under 17 minutes. So we're gonna get this done. We're gonna power through this, guys. Another weekend in the NFL, by the way, where we knew exactly what was gonna happen. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, and that's why we love football, right? There are absolutely never any surprises ever. Did you notice like the weird scheduling thing that went down? For me personally, I was sitting in the bar with my friends, right, on a Sunday. We were chilling out, watching all the games, and the first round of games looked really rough for anybody who was on offense. They looked like there was a ton of interceptions being thrown across the board, which there were. There was an abnormally high number of interceptions this week, which has a lot to do with the fact that a good chunk of teams are starting new starters. There was a ton of pressure from defenses for sure, and I don't know, and this is the weird part, like all the really, really good defenses in the NFL played in the first round of games. So the Rams, the Colts, the Bears, the Steelers, the Panthers all played like the first round of games, right? And then if you want to throw the Browns in there in terms of their secondary, they played the first rounds of games. So it looked really weird in terms of like the scoring overall. It made everybody seem like it was going to be a rough week. And then I thought to myself, I was like, well, all the good defenses are playing now. That means in the second round, there's going to be mad scoring. And lo and behold, old ass 44-year-old Tom Brady throws for 4 touchdowns in an NFL game, as if it is very casually not a big deal. So yeah, other things that went on betting wise, the double-digit dogs out there on the spread. There were 3 teams that were. I'm sorry. Let me phrase this right. There were 3 teams that had double-digit spreads against them. There was like a 12.5 versus the Texans, 11.5 versus like the Lions or something like that, and they went 1-2. So like two of those teams that they were predicted to be blown out were indeed blown out. I did pick against all. I did not take the point. I did take the points on all 3 of the dogs. So I went 1-2 in that situation. I took the Texans. I wasn't surprised that they were competitive against the Browns, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, that was a weird thing that happened. Everybody was down bad. There was a ton of injuries across the board. We saw Tua Tagovailoa go down, mainly because he has an offensive line that apparently has forgotten how to block defenses. That is a difficult thing. Derek Carr at one point looked like he had like a season-ending injury. Andy Dalton went down because of a hamstring injury. Tyrod Taylor goes down because of a hamstring injury. I just told you about Ben Roethlisberger with the torn pec or like the messed up pec muscle, and the list really honestly like goes on. Like the Philadelphia Eagles lost their starting linebacker like 9 plays into their game versus the 49ers. So and that's just one of many. So the big hurt is going to be a long list this week, guys. Just mentally preparing you for that. The big hurt on the Thursday show is going to be a very, very long week. And you know, I'll take this time now, and I'll probably reiterate it on Thursday as well. Here's your warning. You don't have a PhD in math. You do not have a PhD in math. I cannot reiterate that enough. We all know that unless you do have a PhD in math. I don't know. The transitive property is not going to be your friend in week 3. If you don't know what I mean by that is, at this point, you now have 2 pieces of information about each team that you or whatever team you're picking for or against. What you cannot do is say this team beat that team and then lost to this team, and that team that they lost to in week 2 beat this team in week 1, and then that team in week 1 beat this team in week 2 or lost to this team in week 2, and try and think that that's going to give you the exact answer on who's going to win the game. That's not how football works. Don't be that guy. That's your PSA. Anyway, it's week 2, and we've already also got 2 teams that have wholeheartedly apologized to their fans after 2 weeks and are asking them to hold on to hope. Join hands with me and hold on to hope, because that's all we got this season, baby. Anyway, we'll talk about those 2 teams when we get to it. By the way, one of those teams trolled the other team. It was really funny. We start off on Thursday Night Football, the New York Giants versus the Washington Football Team. Thursday Night Football classic, ladies and gentlemen, which means that you try to forget it as soon as you finish seeing it, right? Try to forget it as soon as possible. Daniel Jones got sacked 4 times in the course of this game. He converted 4 of 12 third down plays, and for the most part, it was not great. I will also point out Daniel Jones is cruising towards becoming the new Kirk Cousins. And what I mean by that is Daniel Jones is winless in primetime games. Did not realize that until yesterday when I was doing some research. Kirk Cousins also famously not very good in primetime. I think he's got like 2 wins in primetime games. Same thing for Daniel Jones. Better watch yourself, man. But before you know it, you'll be signing up for $66 million or $100 million guaranteed contracts. And who wants that? But yeah, like I said before, bad day for Daniel Jones in some aspects of it. I will point out the one positive thing. He had 249 yards total on the night, and only 41 of those yards were not air yards. Like, he was slinging that thing out there. He was pushing it down the field, and if you got a quarterback who you know for a fact is not great at his job in terms of, like, making the right read all the time, the fact of the matter is when he's completing passes and he's getting it downfield, it's just going to help in the long run, especially when you know he's doing it against a tough Washington defense, right? That was the impressive part when I went back and looked at the numbers. I was like, oh, wow, Daniel Jones not just out here taking the checkdowns. He's trying to go out here and win this thing. And we saw that a couple of times throughout the course of the game, right? He was going up against the backup Taylor Heineke, who looked I mean, honestly, Taylor Heineke was the better quarterback out of the two that played in this game, and that's not surprising. One, because Taylor's playing on a better team than what the than what the New York Giants have been able to put together. But I felt like he played consistently through all 4 quarters, whereas Daniel Jones played really well in the second half of the game. Daniel Jones at halftime had more rushing yards than he did passing yards. He also led the team in rushing in the course of this game, and he was like 3 yards away from a 100-yard rushing game, which is really, really wild to think about. Daniel Jones is out here just breaking stereotypes left and right. He is a run-first quarterback, ladies and gentlemen, and to be honest with you, he's pretty good at it. So, yeah. By the way, Scary Terry, very good. Terry McLaurin, apparently very good at football. Everybody did not know that. Shout out to Scary Terry for going out there. And other than the situation with him and Taylor Heineke, where Taylor threw the ball to the inside, when he very clearly should have just thrown it to the outside, and Scary Terry would have either dropped the ball or been able to catch it and run away from James Bradberry, who, by the way, historically, James Bradberry and Scary Terry McLaurin have like met up multiple times, and James Bradberry has shut down Terry McLaurin. This is the first time Terry McLaurin beat, like, flat out, like in man-to-man, every time that they were up against each other in situations where they were like, he was either shadowing or he was the nearest defender, Scary Terry got like a bunch of yards. So, like, exercising some demons there, that's pretty impressive. And in Washington, and I will say this, in terms of the excitement of this game, Taylor Heineke knows how to put on a show. Washington had like a game-winning drive that ended up with a touchdown that they thought was going to seal the whole thing up. Then they had what looked like a game-ending interception. And then, of course, the drama with the field goal where the offside penalty gets Dustin Hopkins a second shot at a field goal that he missed the first time around, and then wins the game for Washington. I'm sure that was great to go into the locker room afterwards and be that guy. Even though, like, to be frank, there was a lot of things that led up to that being a game that was decided by a field goal with the final score 30-29. There was a lot of things that led up to the game being decided by that field goal, so it's really hard to just be like, hey, the guy who jumped off sides, it's 100% his fault why we lost that game. It's just not true. Patriots versus Jets, we'll also talk about how somebody who kicks a football got them fired. Patriots versus Jets, we're going to keep this real simple, ladies and gentlemen. Zach Wilson threw 4 interceptions and got sacked 4 times. It was also Bill Belichick versus a rookie quarterback. What do you think happened? The Patriots win. Broncos versus Jaguars. Teddy Two Gloves went out there and did his thing, ladies and gents. 0 turnovers. He got sacked he got sacked like 3 times in a row, or 3 times in total in that game, but we don't need to talk about that. Out of his 26 passes that he threw in this game, 15 of them went for 10+ yards. He had 4 passes that were over 20 yards. So those would be called big plays, right? Like by the people's definitions and everything like that. And also the defense cooked up 2 turnovers, and guess what? The Jaguars felt like it was an appropriate time after a game like that, after a showing like that, where they scored on their first drive of the game, got a sack on their first defensive set of the game, and then subsequently did not score again. The Jaguars felt it was necessary for them to go to the public. They didn't get the notes app out. They got the team letterhead. They got some graphics where the players with Urban Meyer arms linked together and people with their hands over their hearts saying that they're going to go out there and they're going to make you guys proud to be fans of #Duval County. Anyway, I hope the Jaguars enjoy going 0-16 again this season. So that'll be fun. And that'll be, that's going to be a hotly contested matchup the second time the Jaguars play the Texans. We'll see. Like I said before, Teddy Two Gloves went out there and took care of business for him. You let Teddy do his thing, all right? You let Teddy go out there. You let Teddy make the magic happen, and you just sit back and you enjoy yourself. Defense combined with Teddy not turning the ball over, name a more dynamic duo. You can't. Bills versus Dolphins. This is actually got a really weird thing that happened. Every time I looked at the TV where this game was supposed to be, that documentary about Dolphins getting slaughtered, The Cove, was on TV for some reason. I don't know what that was about. Anyway, PFF graded the Dolphins offensive line 27 out of 100. And honestly, the joke that people were making in the comments is actually pretty accurate. People were saying, wow, 27, that's kind of high. And to their credit, I guess you get a certain amount. It's like the SAT. You get like a certain amount of points for writing your name. I think you get a certain amount of points for having 5 guys on the field that are blocking or trying to block the opposing team's defensive line. So, with that being said, let's go into how you end up with the 27 out of 100 as a blocking grade as a unit. Tua Tagovailoa, starting quarterback, got knocked out of the game. He's now got bruised ribs. There's a question of if he's going to play this week, and it was because somebody did not block a left defensive end, just like completely unblocked to the quarterback, and it was not fun for Tua, from what I understood. And then, by the way, the first drive of the game, Tua Tagovailoa got sacked twice. He got sacked on first down, so he got sacked on the first play of the game, yes. And then he got sacked on third down to end that drive within 4 plays. So that was great. They also followed up after Tua was taken out of the game, literally carted off the field, or carted off of the sideline. Jacoby Brissett was sacked twice on back-to-back plays at one point during this drive, and then he was sacked 2 more times. There was a muffed punt by the Dolphins inside their own red zone that gave the ball back to the Bills for an easy touchdown. And to the Bills' credit, they went out there and they leaned on the force that, honestly, they totally forgot about versus the Steelers, and they just abandoned the run. They went out there and they let Zach Moss and Devin Singletary go do their thing, and they ran all over. I will say this: I thought they were running to kill the clock. They were not. They ran less. They ran fewer times than they got fewer rushing carries than Derrick Henry did. They just spent a lot of time inside the red zone of the Miami Dolphins, and they used those chances to run the ball, and it worked very, very well. Zach Moss had 2 touchdowns. This may be a product of working on a short field the entire game, even though they only started 3 of their 12 drives inside Miami territory. I kind of got like some red flags that were up in terms of like the Bills offense. They scored 35 points in a game where they pulled a shutout. And I get it, 35 points is a lot. But based off of like the plays that were made, like they took away 3 possessions from the Bills. Like defensively, they took away 3 possessions from the Bills. They are supposed to be like a high-powered offense. This seems like a 50-point type game, but I get they were trying to kill the clock at a certain point, but it just kind of felt funny. I don't know how to really describe it. It was just watching the game. You felt like there were a lot of plays that they just didn't make. You felt like there were a lot of situations where the Miami Dolphins defense was still playing like the Miami Dolphins defense and made it difficult on the Bills to get upfield. And then combine that with what happened in week 1, I'm a little iffy on the Bills. I will say the Dolphins and the Steelers are probably going to be two top 10 defenses by the time the end of the season rolls around. So, also this is a really positive note on the Bills side of things defensively. AJ Epinesa, who was a draft pick out of Iowa, who a lot of critics said that he's just like a freak athlete. He's not actually like a well-polished defensive end. He got 9 QB pressures in this game versus the Dolphins, and I get it. They were playing against 5 guys who called themselves an offensive line in the NFL. But yeah, he went out there and got 9 pressures, and I felt like that was pretty awesome for him to finally kind of, go out there, make himself known. He had a couple of really good plays last season, but to see him be able to take advantage of a bad offensive line lets you know that he's able to take advantage of a bad offensive line. That's the first step to being good. Last time I checked. Moving on, Saints-Panthers. The Panthers just flat out covered like they knew the Saints playbook throughout the course of this game, and it showed. They got 2 interceptions, they got multiple sacks, and they got a ton of pressure on one Jameis Winston. And I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, based off the way he was throwing that ball, he was able to see everybody that was on the field. It did not stop him from throwing the ball to the opponent, and I think that there's a lot to be said about how little they ran the ball overall and how effective it was. The D-line for the Carolina Panthers was very effective, and this final score is 26-7 for a reason. The Panthers defense is once again looking like it is star-studded, and the Panthers, by the way, 2-0. Every week the Panthers win, I want somebody to call Adam Gase and tell him that he's fired. Just for me personally. But yeah, it was a rough one. Oh, by the way, Christian McCaffrey, very wily, very difficult for people to take down. Who would have thought? The guy who has 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving, and probably would have done it last year if he had been able to play an entire season, minus an injury or whatever. But yeah, no, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. The Carolina Panthers generated 2 turnovers in this one. They also got 4 sacks to go along with it. And yeah, no doubt. And the Saints did not help with their 11 penalties. So that's great for them. That's a great recipe for losing games. Day and night between game 1 and game 2 for the Saints, and I'm sure Saints radio in New Orleans is being very reasonable about this whole situation. Moving on. Raiders, Steelers. This one right here. Oh, man. Big win for the Raiders overall. They did a great job, one, of taking advantage of a bad offense led by one big Ben Roethlisberger, who is getting more big than the size-wise than gameplay-wise. But I will say this, they got two shutout quarters versus the Steelers. The Steelers only had 7 points at halftime, and they were able to kind of turn it on in the second half. We actually saw Deontay Johnson look like himself from a year ago. Chase Claypool made a couple of key catches as well. We saw Najee Harris get a lot of good runs. Juju Smith-Schuster even came up with a touchdown on an end-around kind of deal with this. And both of the quarterbacks in the situation only got sacked twice. But the fact of the matter is, the big difference maker, we saw a ton of balance from the Las Vegas Raiders. 25 rushing carries for 52 yards in comparison to the 28 completions off the 37 attempts. It was an attempt to try and be a balanced offensive front against one of the best defenses in the NFL. They did not abandon the run, and it paid off for them in the second half of that game. And I feel like that's something to point out. Derek Carr making a couple of key plays as well. One of his best games in his NFL career, I would argue, against a high-level defense. Derek Carr played better against the Steelers than Josh Allen did, the guy who's supposed to be the superhero, right? But yeah, Derek Carr combined that with finally getting some love to Henry Ruggs. That huge pass to Henry Ruggs is going to go a long way in terms of, one, people believing that Derek Carr is capable of pushing the ball down the field when players are open, because I think a lot of people just assume that he was too scared to try and throw the ball down the field as a quarterback. And I will say that seems like a reach, especially coming from a guy who spent all of last season throwing to Tyrell Williams, who also had like a touchdown in the first 8 games of the season deeper down the field. People just like to believe certain narratives. Anyway, overall, great game from the Raiders, especially considering they thought at one point that Derek Carr was out for the entire season, as we all did across the board. Darren Waller did not get to the 100 yards he needed to get 5 consecutive 100-yard receiving games, but nonetheless, the dub, I think, will suffice for him when it's all said and done. Let me double check. Yeah, he got 65 yards in this game. Henry Ruggs led the team with 113 off of 61. That long 61-yard run that actually sealed the game away for the Raiders. So big ups to them, and the Raiders playing some semblance of defense, even though they played against a bad offense. You got to shut down the bad offenses before you can shut down the good ones. So, yeah, big win for the Raiders overall. They went out there and they got the dub. I was thoroughly surprised that the Steelers couldn't muster up just one more touchdown to win this one. But, yeah, 49ers, Eagles 17-11. This game actually turned out to be just as good as I thought it was going to be. There was a combination of Jalen Hurts looking very good, just not being able to finish. So the final score, of course, showed that the 49ers won this game because they were playing against, they were two of the best defenses in the NFL going back and forth. And I banked on the fact that the Eagles having the better offense out of the two teams that we saw, they have more versatility within their offense. They were going to be able to come out here and figure some stuff out. I know people are already talking about Sirianni. Wait, no, Anyway, they were talking about the Eagles head coach struggling to get like play calls that were actually going to be viable in certain defensive situations. And when you're playing against the 49ers, guess what? There's not too many right answers to the test, so you shouldn't be too upset when you pick the wrong answer when it's all said and done. But yeah, the Eagles score doesn't reflect how well they played on offense, in my opinion. They had one of their drives. They had a 6-play drive. They got down to the 3-yard line. They covered 97 yards of the field, got down to the 3-yard line and got stuffed on 4th down, and that took away what potentially was a touchdown, because that was a touchdown momentum type drive. Other key things that happened in this one, Jordan Mailata, who everybody's been talking about since he got his extension last week. He's a former rugby player turned offensive lineman in the NFL. He went up against Nick Bosa, one of the best defensive linemen, if not the best defensive lineman in the NFL, right behind Aaron Donald, right? 32 pass blocking snaps. He gave up 0 pressures, 0 QB hits, and he sure ain't give up no goddamn sack. That's got to have you pumped as an Eagles fan. Jalen Hurts, with the way that they looked, they just had drives they couldn't finish off. One, because the 49ers defense is nasty as shit in the red zone. Fred Warner is one of the best linebackers in the NFL. There's no question about that, my guy. And on top of that, when Dre Greenlaw comes back for the 49ers, they're going to be even worse to try and defend against. But nonetheless, Jalen Hurts, great passes throughout the course of this game. The 49ers run offense, despite all the times that they got kicked in the nuts, like behind the line of scrimmage, there were multiple times where they just rushed for yardage that they just got nothing out of. They stuck with it. Jimmy Garoppolo came up with a couple of key passes to kind of offset the just heavy run plays throughout the course of this game, as he usually does. He's not the focal point. He is a part of the machine. So there were 38 carries there were 38 rushing carries, 117 yards and a touchdown out of it, and Jimmy Garoppolo came up clutch. He came up with 30. He went 22 of 30, guys, 22 of 30, but only for 189 yards. And hold on, let's play our favorite game. How many air yards did Jimmy Garoppolo throw for in the course of this game? That's, if you don't know. Sorry, hold on. We're in the right game. I'm just making sure. If you guys don't know what air yards are, the air yards are the actual distance that the ball covers as it arrives at a receiver if it is caught by that receiver. And it is so important to point out, because there's a big difference between like a 389-yard passing, like the kind of games that Teddy Bridgewater has at times. Sometimes, like one of the 20 plus yard passes that Teddy Bridgewater had in his game for Denver versus the Jaguars was a 30-yard reception by Melvin Gordon for a touchdown. That's one of those things where it's like he threw the ball 2 yards forward. Melvin Gordon caught it and then did the rest of the work. That happened a lot last year for one Jimmy Garoppolo, and I have a strange feeling it may have also happened a ton in this game as well. We'll see. Hold on. I'm trying to find it real quick. Let's see where the air yards are for one Jimmy Garoppolo. It's usually in the advanced stats. I don't know why it's not coming up. Anyway, the 49ers came out here. They actually had a mixture of running backs that went out there and played. Trey Sermon got hurt, but Elijah Mitchell, who played 61% of the plays on the field, the only other back that played even close to that was Kyle Juszczyk. Everybody else. Oh, by the way, Brandon Ayuk apparently just not getting any love as a wide receiver now. But the second most frequently used running back was JaMycal Hasty, who was able to come up with a couple of good rushing yards. I will point out the important thing to remember, guys, is that they went up against a really good Eagles defense. So you have to imagine that when they play against another team like next week, when they play against, let me double check this. When they play against the Packers, there's going to be a lot of rushing. There's going to be a lot of rushing yards in that. There's going to be a lot of rushing yards in that game. There's no doubt about that. Let me see if I can find... God damn it, man. This is taking like way too long, especially since I'm already late. Advanced 2021. Let's go. Advanced 2021 for Jimmy Garoppolo. Air yards. Here we go. Completed air yards. So Jimmy Garoppolo had 189 yards in the game. 62 of them were air yards. 62. So less than half. That's not good. That's not great. We'll say his intended air yards was 140 in that game. So intended air yards are passes that were either dropped or incomplete. He had 127 yards of yak from his receivers. So yeah, Jimmy's back up to his old tricks. Can't fool me, Jimmy. You can't fool me. But yeah, that's basically how that all shook out. This game came down to like the last drive, which is the kind of cool part about it. The Eagles did get a touchdown at the end of it to kind of make it look a lot better. But the fact of the matter is the Eagles played really well, did not finish well. The 49ers were able to, as they do, enforce their will upon the opponent. And Kyle Shanahan was able to cook up a way to make Jimmy Garoppolo look reasonable. Moving on, Titans Seahawks. This is probably one of the most important games of the entire weekend. One for NFC West purposes, and this is an opportunity for the Tennessee Titans to prove that they are the best team in the AFC South, because beating the Seahawks will kind of convince me of that for sure. The Tennessee Titans scored 14 points in the fourth quarter of this game, whereas the Seahawks scored 21 points in the second quarter of this game, and they kind of teetered off towards the back half of it, but we're not going to talk about that. This game came down to overtime, and it was finished off by, you guessed it, as everybody knows, the long-standing kicker for the Tennessee Titans, Fat Randy. because the Titans have honestly just rotated through kickers, and I have a friend who is a Tennessee Titans fan, and consistently he does not know who the kicker for his team is depending upon the year. He actually thinks that Brett Kern should just be the kicker because at least Brett Kern is able to punt the ball away. I personally believe the Tennessee Titans shouldn't let anybody put their foot near a ball at all, ever, and their lives will be a lot better off for it. Ryan Tannehill almost had 400 yards in this game. He had 347. A lot of those passes that he threw were dropped. I did not see the exact drop numbers that were had throughout the course of this game, but I'm sure somebody will tell me. Trying to check. There was a fumble in the course of this one as well, but overall, this game was between two really high quality quarterbacks. The Seattle Seahawks looked a lot more comfortable out there on the field than the Tennessee Titans did overall, and that was the weird part about it. Like, the Tennessee Titans got like 33 first downs. They spent a lot of time throwing checkdowns. There was a couple of plays like A.J. Brown and Julio Jones had contested catches that were over the middle. There were a lot of plays that were like easy out route type stuff. There were a lot of flag routes that just didn't get caught. And like I was in the bar with my friends, like I told you before. One of them was a Tennessee Titans fan, and you know, fans are delusional to a certain point. There were times where, like, Ryan Tannehill was throwing behind Julio Jones while he was running an out route, and they were mad that he, like, dropped the pass because his two hands touched the ball. And I'm like, cool, his two hands touched the ball, but his whole body's momentum was going the opposite direction of the pass. And at the end of the day, Ryan Tannehill was planting his foot to throw that pass. So he threw it where he wanted to throw it. It was an inaccurate throw that was not caught. So, like, I don't really get how you can get mad at a receiver for that, but it did cost them in a key drive that was potentially a game winner for them when it was all said and done. There were 30 seconds left on the clock when the Seattle Seahawks got the ball in the back half of the fourth quarter for a potential game-winning drive, and they wasted most of that time throwing the ball to Travis Homer, who slipped out of who caught a pass that he probably should have just dropped to stop the clock from running, but he caught it and he stayed in bounds and could not progress the ball because he stepped out of bounds almost immediately and they did not stop the clock. So that was very weird. It went from 30 seconds to 17 seconds after one play, and then everything else was drop back coverage. And for a Tennessee Titans defense that honestly did not look good throughout the course of this game, they got some pressure. They got some pressure in key moments for sure. When it was all said and done, they got 3 sacks on Russell Wilson. So anytime you get 3 sacks on Russell Wilson, you're doing your job in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, they did not get consistent excellence across the board. They didn't get consistent excellence across the board defensively. Secondary got beat a couple of times. They had a couple of key passes that were, Patrick Swain, and then the Tyler Lockett play that a lot of people saw. And I think Russell Wilson's just good for one of those passes a game, which is the nice part about having him as a fantasy quarterback. He's just good for a killer touchdown throw, like at least one time a game. But the rushing attack for the Seattle Seahawks was not existent. Like, they almost abandoned the run. Basically, they only had 18 carries throughout the course of this game, but they did get 2 rushing touchdowns. So, like, when it came time to run that ball, they knew what time to do it. But the offense overall was definitely on the back of Russell Wilson, and it seems like the Seahawks are kind of back to where they were just a year ago. But then again, what's the point of having a superstar quarterback if you don't use him and let him go out there and win the game? So, I will say this: the Seahawks having 100 yards worth of penalty yardage, not great. Not great at all. But yeah, Tennessee Titans came up clutch in overtime. They got a defensive stop, and also it was very weird. You go watch the highlights. They almost called Russell Wilson down while he was in the process, I will admit, in the process of being sacked, but he also looked like he was about to escape. The jersey was being pulled. Russell Wilson had enough strength left in his arm to fling it and get the ball back to the line of scrimmage. He was outside the tackle box, and they almost called him in the grass. If they had called it a safety, he would have won the game, and the Tennessee Titans would have been victorious when it was all said and done. So that was fun. That was a really fun game overall. I felt like there were a lot of great plays across the board, but fact of the matter is, a couple of key plays defensively from the Seattle Seahawks, like allowing that rush from Derrick Henry around the edge, and then, of course, a touchdown that was taken away from the Tennessee Titans in a sketchy manner, may have defined this one overall. As usual, the referees kind of interfering with stuff, which, by the way, was the theme of the week, right? There was that montage, that compilation of taunting penalties where players are just talking smack to other players, and then a flag flew in for no reason. That was fun for everybody. One key note for the Seattle Seahawks: Dwayne Brown and Damian Lewis has allowed 0 pressures from the Tennessee Titans. So another good week for the offensive line. I haven't seen any numbers about the Seattle Seahawks pressure or ability to get pressure in the course of this game. So have to wait on that one and check it out later. So hopefully it was some good stuff. The Vikings and the Cardinals, this one was exhilarating. One, it had Gus Johnson on the call. And if you don't know who Gus Johnson is, he's basically the human form of cocaine. So, Gus Johnson, Vikings versus Cardinals. This is the moment where Kyler Murray did something that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady have only done twice in their career. And now Kyler Murray has also done it twice in his career. He did it in week 1 and week 2. It is 400 plus yards passing, 100 plus yards rushing, and I think it's like 3 plus passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown in a single game, which is crazy to think about that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady have done it, but also we've seen them get some QB sneak action going on sometimes. One of these things is not like the other, is the way to phrase it when it comes to the Arizona, between Kyler Murray and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. But nonetheless, Kyler Murray is playing like a man possessed. So if you didn't get his touchdowns, he had a touchdown celebration at this point where he got down, it was in, crisscross applesauce, and he had his fingers in the ring type situation, mimicking Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian, because earlier this week, Chandler Jones, who... In the course of a media scrum, Kyler Murray said, yeah, he takes his shirt off in the locker room and it's kind of embarrassing. Like, I don't get how he's so good at playing football, like obviously cracking a joke or whatever. And then Chandler Jones quote tweets it, and he quote tweets the audio clip or the video clip, and he says, is somebody going to tell Baby Yoda that his hairstyle is whack? Because Kyler Murray has grown out his hair to get braids. I don't even think those are dreads, but they look like dreads. They're just like really thick dreads. Anyway, that being said, the first half of this game was absolutely bananas. Kirk Cousins was playing like the Kirk Cousins people. You know what he did? He did that thing where, like, he played so poorly in week 1 that now in week 2, like, everybody comes into this game, they're like, oh, Kirk Cousins is about to blow this game for us in some way, shape, or form. He's about to totally screw us over. And then, of course, he does that thing where he convinces you that he deserves all the money that he's getting paid and that he's actually good at his job, which, by the way, at times Kirk Cousins is very good at his job. He's just not good at his job consistently enough to warrant the amount of attention and the amount of money that he gets. We all know that. But nonetheless, battling Kyler Murray back and forth in this one, we literally saw Kirk Cousins on the opening drive of the game throw a 64-yard pass to KJ Osborne for a touchdown. That is not what a typical Kirk Cousins does. Adam Thielen got a touchdown, and then we saw Justin Jefferson get one right after that, and they had the Cardinals down bad, 20-7 at one point in this game. And I will point out there was a missed PAT by Greg Joseph, and that will become something to think about later on in this game. So, Rondale Moore, who had 2 crazy plays in the course of this game. He had one touchdown that was caught. He had 2 crazy plays. One of them was a fumble popped out as he was jumping across the pylon, and it was caught by a linebacker, Virgil, who had a pick 6 in the course of this game. And for some reason, when he got into the end zone, threw the ball away. Don't know why. I don't know how many times Virgil's gotten a pick 6, but you typically want to hold on to the football. But nonetheless, the Vikings defense came to play in this one. They got multiple turnovers in the course of this game, and they got a ton of pressure on Kyler Murray. But pressure on Kyler Murray is how he does silly things. It's how he does the silly things on you and makes you feel bad about playing football anymore. Nonetheless, the Minnesota Vikings, they played, I would say, pretty well, considering they're supposed to be the less talented team out of these two. Especially a lot of that centered around the fact that Kirk Cousins went out there and took care of business, baby. Yeah, 244 yards, and he maximized it. They were really balanced. So the Vikings up front, they didn't try and match the Cardinals, what they were doing blow for blow. They went out there and they threw the ball 32 times, and then they ran the ball 27 times. They tried to keep it right down the middle because they have a top-tier running back, and they have a decent quarterback most of the time. They have a quarterback who plays decently most of the time. He only got sacked 1 time in the course of this game. This is the heart-wrenching part about this is they fumbled the ball twice, didn't lose it. They got 16 yards of they got 16 penalty yards in the course of this game. The brutal part about this is the Minnesota Vikings basically played a perfect game other than the missed PAT and then the game-winning field goal that they missed at the end. That's heartbreaking type stuff. it's very similar to what happened to them last year. They had a lot of games that came down to one possession, or the last possession being the determinant who wins the game. And this was another example of it, man. This Nick Visual guy over here. Sorry, that was the guy who got the interception. I have not heard of him, and obviously I need to do my research on Nick because he played out of his fucking mind in this game, no doubt about that. He had 8 combined tackles. Xavier Woods went out there and got himself an interception, and honestly, like, the Vikings did everything that they could to beat the Cardinals and still came up 1 point short again. By the way, second week in a row, brutal stuff. But nonetheless, that was a high quality game, and I liked it a lot. The Rams played the Colts. This is the wildest thing that's happened in the course of this one. Somehow, some way, Carson Wentz hurt both of his ankles in the course of a single game. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, there is a deal in place that if Carson Wentz doesn't play enough carries, some draft picks go back to some certain people. So each one of these injuries is paramount. Also, of course, the amount of pressure and attention paid to Carson Wentz is way too high for a guy who used to be really good in the last 2 years, has not been playing very well. But I will say, in the course of this game, the Rams coming up with this win was a product of not only their defense going out there and playing at a high level, 27-24, but Carson Wentz made some amazing plays in this game. Carson Wentz made some really strong plays in the course of this game, and there's no way that you can deny that, right? He had an amazing touchdown pass, and I will say it is hilarious that he had a shovel pass intercepted in the course of this game. But under the understanding of how much pressure the Rams were putting him under, which, by the way, a lot when you look at it in its totality, there were most of the times that he made highlight plays, he was on the run. So, I mean, they got to hope that they get him back because he's their best shot to win games. But fact of the matter is, Carson Wentz under a massive amount of pressure because of the offensive line situation with the Colts, which a lot of people are not really talking about. But the Rams came out here. They had another killer game. Matthew Stafford still holding on, man. Matthew Stafford still making really good plays overall. When you look at it, they were consistent throughout the game. They were consistent first, second, third, and fourth quarter, in my opinion. And that's all you can really ask for, because with the way that their defense plays, if they're consistently scoring a touchdown every single quarter, they're going to win almost every game that they play. There's not going to be many teams that are going to challenge them to be like, you need to throw up 54 points or you won't beat us. You need to throw up 35 points or you won't beat us. And if the Rams are going to be able to come out here and not turn the ball over, which, by the way, they had 2 turnovers in the course of this game, but so did the Colts when it was all said and done. Like I said, that intercepted. I just want to really emphasize a intercepted shovel pass. Intercepted 5-yard shovel pass. Kind of wild to think about. But yeah, third down conversion rate was really high for the Colts. They went 5 for 11, which, by the way, I think is the best out of the teams that competed in week 2 when it was all said and done. But this is a really good showing for the Rams. They played a close game, and they played a close game versus the Colts, and the Colts once again proved that they have a lot of really talented football players, and they just haven't put it together. It's just really that's all they're waiting on, for it to all come together, and hopefully it does before the season's over with. Michael Pittman Jr., by the way, making his first appearance this season. He had 8 catches for 123 yards, and once again, Zach Pascal, who had 112 yards in those 2 touchdowns last week, got another touchdown this week. So he's got 3 in the course of 2 weeks. Keep your eye on that guy. He's pretty good. And he's getting better. Seemingly very well liked by one Carson Wentz for some reason. Shout out to him. Texans versus Browns. I really don't want to talk about this one. This was a blatant attempt to tank a football game. So Tyrod Taylor and the Houston Texans are going blow for blow with the Cleveland Browns. They went out there. They were stuffing Nick Chubb. It was very clear that there was a defensive game plan to make Baker Mayfield's arm beat them. And then when Jarvis Landry somehow he had a knee injury in the first quarter, and was removed for the rest of the game, it got even easier to stick to that game plan because Baker Mayfield now didn't have as many talented receivers on the field, and he had to make great plays by himself, which he struggled to do on a lot of the drives that we saw. At halftime, they scored 14-14. Tyrod Taylor had a rushing touchdown. He also had one play that people are claiming is how he hurt his hamstring, and it's him running to the left-hand side making a pass. I see a lot of people on Twitter talking about how Tyrod Taylor has terrible luck. I don't think this one was a luck situation. I think this was more of a divine intervention, if you know what I mean. Anyway, the Houston Texans end up losing this game, and by the way, they covered in the course of it, despite having to go out there with their backup rookie quarterback Davis Mills, who, by the way, had one good drive in the course of this. They lost by 10 in this game, and Davis Mills, young man, you better be careful how good you play. That's all I'll say. Better be careful how good you play. Your hamstring might be hurt too before you know it. But also Andy Janovich, fullback touchdown in this one. But yeah, the Browns went out there and they did their thing, especially in the second half. The run game really started to take over, 156 yards total. It's really nice when you have two starting running backs as your 1-2 punch in the course of this game. Baker Mayfield getting sacked twice. At one point, actually had a shoulder dislocated from what we saw. The Browns fumbled the ball 3 times. It was recovered once. There was one key muffed situation that turned the tides of this game, and it was, of course, after that first drive from the Cleveland Browns. They got the ball back after they punted it because of a muffed punt and a great defensive stance by the Texans. But hey, what are you going to do? It's just really hard to not be frustrated because it clearly seems like there were shenanigans going on in that game. But very inspired by the way that the Texans played overall in this one. For a team that's supposed to be, winless on the season, having to go to their backup rookie quarterback and still only losing by 10 points. And then, of course, if you actually watched the game and you saw how it unfolded, you would be thoroughly impressed with a team that every media outlet ever has told you that they're going to be one of the worst teams or they're going to be the worst team in the NFL. It's very clearly not the case. I'm not sitting here talking about them winning the playoffs or anything like that, but with Tyrod Taylor and Nico Hollins out, their offense is going to be heavily hampered, but, we'll see what happens. Moving on, Falcons versus Buccaneers. I'll summarize this one very quickly for you. This is one of the other teams who had an apology letter, an apology graphic that they posted on social media. The Jags quote tweeted it and said, "Hey fam, if you just," they said they made like a meme. No, they were like, "Hey fam, can I cheat off your test? Yeah, sure, just change it up and make it look different." And then and it was the same thing. It was really funny because like the Jags, I don't know if they were trying to, like, that's a cell phone, right? Like the Jags quote tweeting the Falcons apology graphic, making fun of the fact that the Falcons did an apology graphic the same week that they did an apology graphic on their social media in week 2 of the NFL season, telling the fans to hold on to hope. Cell phone. That has to be. This one was kind of close for a little while there. It was a little back and forth action, but the turnovers eventually really did the Falcons in. When it was all said and done, the final score in this one, it was a lot to a little. It was 48-25, ladies and gentlemen, and Tom Brady did the Tom Brady thing. I'm going to tell you this right now. Number one thing I know about Tom Brady, he don't need your help to score points. And the Falcons did everything in their power to make sure that the Buccaneers got some free buckets. Mike Edwards had more receiving touchdowns than the entire offense for the Falcons. The entire receiving corps for the Falcons. Mike Edwards with 2 pick six. Count them, 2 pick six, ladies and gentlemen. And to their credit, bad decisions are bad decisions. 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions for Matt Ryan. Rough day. Also, only 55 rushing yards. We love to see it. You really do. You really do. I think Mike Edwards also had more receiving yards than pretty much every receiver for the Falcons. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened. Mike Edwards is a safety for the Buccaneers, by the way. So, yeah. The Bengals took on the Bears. This the biggest thing that came out of this. The Justin Fields situation is now at the forefront again because Andy Dalton is down for a hamstring injury. Justin Fields goes out there and the Bears win a game. And it was probably the most viable situation for the Bengals possible in the sense that the Bengals actually, led by a semi-rookie quarterback. Like, Joe Burrow didn't play all of his rookie season. Justin Fields went out there. He had one of the best defenses in the NFL on his side, and he had a little bit of room for error in terms of margin for error, and he took advantage of it, and they were able to go out there and get a win. They pieced one together. It was 20-17 when it was all said and done. Joe Burrow had a nice pass to Jamar Chase. Overall, for two teams that are quote-unquote rebuilding, you call that a win. That's competitive type stuff. I will point out almost all the points got scored in the fourth quarter. That's when the drama got weird. Literally, like, all but 3 points were scored. Like the Bengals got shut out in the first half, and they scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth. The Bears scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth. They missed a PAT, and then they also had a touchdown in the first. So, yeah, it was rough to watch that one. It was rough to watch it where I was at as well. So, I'm glad the visual also matched up with what we all were feeling. But, yeah, Cowboys-Chargers, like I mentioned before in the breakdown, this was going to be one of the best games of the entire week, and it did not disappoint. For as many great offensive plays there were in this game, there were still a ton of people. For as many great offensive plays as we saw on both sides of this game, there were a ton of great defensive plays that went along with it that kept the score low. We had multiple turnovers for each one of the quarterbacks. It was a rough go to start this off for Ezekiel Elliott. There was literally one point where Tony Pollard looked like he should be the starting running back for the Cowboys. But we'll see how that goes as the season goes along. You can never have too many good running backs. That's how it works in the NFL, especially since everybody's one play away from having their entire season be over with, right? But yeah, the Cowboys went out there. They were slinging that thing around. CeeDee Lamb is getting utilized more and more in different facets. He had one rushing carry out as a running back out of the backfield at one point. And I mean, they're getting weird. The Cowboys are out here getting weird, and they look like the best team in the NFC Beast. There's no doubt about that. The Chargers have yet another sketchy week of offensive success. At least this week, Austin Eckler had a lot of really good rushing plays. We saw Mike Williams get a key touchdown, and Justin Herbert is actually involving Jared Cook, who every time he catches the ball should make you feel like you're 60 years old, because he's still looking out there. He's still out there looking great, and, you're not. Jared Cook, eternally youthful. Literally the fountain of youth. Forever will Jared Cook. Long live Jared Cook is what I will say. This one came down to the final play of the game, and it was Greg the Leg on the line again, and we saw what happened in week 1, where it also came down to a field goal. I think the Cowboys learned their lesson. I will point out, don't like the fact that they didn't score any points in the second or third quarter. They scored almost all of their points in the first, and then proceeded to struggle for the rest of the game, whereas the Chargers were able to get multiple field goals and a touchdown throughout the course of this one. It was something to behold. This game, like I said, a lot of great offensive plays until you got into the red zone. And then all of a sudden, everybody remember how to play defense. Oh, Trayvon Diggs. 2 interceptions, 2 games. I think he's got 5 interceptions in the course of the 15 games he's played in the NFL. The Cowboys may have one. They may have gotten one, ladies and gentlemen. That was very impressive to see him go out there and play. And like I said before, it's hard to find anybody on the Chargers to be like, we stop this guy, we win this game. And that's just impossible, right? But yeah, that was a rough go for the Chargers. They got a clutch win in week 1, and then not so clutch loss in week 2. And, everything is decided by a couple of plays, especially when you're talking about some of the best teams, because I believe that both of these teams will be playoff teams. We'll see what happens in the long run. Chiefs versus Ravens. Oh, the drama. Oh, buddy. The drama was brought in this matchup, decided by 1 point, 36-35, ladies and gentlemen. And if you didn't see it, truly iconic moment from not only Harbaugh, but on top of that, the belief that Lamar Jackson has in himself overall as a quarterback. 36-35 was the final score in this one. It came down to one last drive. They got an interception off of Pat. I'm sorry, they got a 4th down stop. Turnover on downs, I believe. Hold on a second. Let me double check. While I'm mentally double checking, I'll recap all the crazy shit that happened. Tyrann Mathieu had a 34-yard pick 6 to start the game off on the first drive of the Ravens offensive drive. No big deal. There was also a recovery of a fumble in the end zone. That was the 2nd touchdown in this game. Have not said a single word about Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in terms of scoring. But yeah, the 3rd touchdown scored, and this was a 33-yard pass. Latavius Murray. By the way, the running back situation, the only problem that the Ravens are really having is deciding who's going to be the number 1 guy. They said it's Tyshawn Williams, who's been playing lights out. He had the Ravens had 251 yards total. They had 3 rushing touchdowns when this game was all said and done. Latavius Murray got one. I think Tyshawn Williams got one as well. And, of course, Lamar Jackson got one to go along with it. So that was pretty clutch when it was all said and done. We saw Byron Pringle get a couple of a huge 40-yard pass, but easily the most impressive touchdown we saw in the course of this game was Travis Kelce's 46-yard rush that looked like it was just supposed to be like a 15-yard gain, and thanks to some blocking downfield from the wide receivers of the Kansas City Chiefs, turned into a touchdown. You love to see that kind of hustle. You really do. But nonetheless, the Ravens and the Chiefs look like two of the best teams in the NFL. And despite the fact that Lamar Jackson had that one moment where he literally threw in the triple coverage, and then, over time you make up for it. Marquise Brown has had one heck of a season to start off with. It looks like he's finally either 100% healthy or finally putting it all together. So that being said, ladies and gents, this came down to a dramatic fourth down play, and it was between Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. They were 1 yard shy of being able to ice the game, and Harbaugh just yells onto the field and says, "Hey, Lamar, do you want to go for this? Lamar, do you want to go for this?" It wasn't even a question. Like, he said it very calmly. It wasn't like he was freaking out frantically. He was just like, "We'll do what you want to do. If we go out with our players believing that they had a chance to impact and win the game, that's all we need. It's week 2 of the season, and this is a chance to beat a team that we've never beaten before. The Ravens, as long as Lamar Jackson has been the starter, have never beaten the Chiefs, right? And they go for a QB power off the left-hand side, and Jeff Schwartz has a breakdown of it, uses the spoon and everything, does a breakdown of it, and basically talked about how there was only one person that had a chance to even stop that play, and they were on the opposite side of where the run was at. So, the offensive line play, we saw, like I mentioned before, Alejandro Villanueva, who got shifted over from right tackle to left tackle, played lights out in the course of that game, especially on that game-winning play. He was able to not only help with a duo block, but also throw off a tight end, help a tight end with their duo block, and then work his way up to the linebacker level and get some help for Lamar Jackson to get even more room to get that first down and ice the game. Honestly, if there was one game that you had to rewatch from week 2, it would be this one. There's no question. It was some of the best it's probably going to be some of the best football you see all season. I'm not going to lie. And especially considering one of these teams has like a dynamic run game and the other one has a non-existent one. The Chiefs' run game is like falling off a cliff, guys. It's basically not there anymore. 343 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception for Patrick Mahomes when it was all said and done. There was not like a ton. The penalty yardage was pretty much even. The third down conversions, the Kansas City Chiefs converted on 1 third down in the course of this game, but they only faced 6 of them. So that tells you everything you need to know. The Ravens defense was getting torn up for the first half of this game, and then they came out and they looked pretty impressive the second half when it was all said and done. A huge night for Travis Kelce, of course, 109 yards. He's the fastest tight end to get to 1,000 yards receiving ever. And then on the other side, Marquise Brown leading the team in receiving yards, 116, baby. You like to see it from a guy that you've invested so much in as a quarterback, as a wide receiver and a draft pick. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'll finish off with Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football. The Lions played the Packers, and nature took its course. The Packers won that one. They went with a really balanced approach, in my opinion. Aaron Jones went out there, obviously dominating. He had like 4 touchdowns when it was all said and done, but it felt like the old Packers that we've seen just a year ago. And I still wonder, like, what did the Saints know about the Packers that we didn't, in terms of how to get pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and that seemed to be the only thing that was the difference. The Packers scored a touchdown in every single quarter, and in the third quarter they scored 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's how you win. The pace was relentless. The Lions could not keep up. The Lions got shut out in the second half. Just facts. They couldn't rush the ball when it was all said and done. They had a couple of big plays, and I think that's what the Lions are really heavily dependent upon, going to be dependent upon this season, making big plays, because they don't have the kind of wide receiving core like they did last year, which was really good, like Kenny Golladay up front and him being able to make some stuff happen. But 108 yards rushing from the Detroit Lions off of 19 carries. Most of that was caught up in like one really big run, but that's a discussion for another day. Jared Goff is in for a rough one. And I will, like I said before, what I said with Tom Brady, he doesn't need your help scoring. So when you see that the Detroit Lions also had 2 turnovers in the course of this one, both of them, one was an interception and one was a fumble recovered. Yeah, they don't need your help. They really don't. they really don't need your help in terms of getting more possessions to score. And you're just not going to win against the Packers, who bounce back big time against a team that is objectively not good this year and is not going to be good. They're getting more and more injured as the season goes along, and Dan Campbell's doing everything in his power to try and figure out, how to work around their talent problems. But, when you're going up against Aaron Rodgers, bad things are going to happen. Unless you got bad things to give to Aaron Rodgers, bad things are going to happen to you. They got a couple of key sacks for sure. The offensive line situation is at some point going to become a major problem. But right now, because of how quick they were on the run game, they killed it rushing-wise, which is weird because they only had 96 rushing yards. But Aaron Jones, once again, doing that thing where he very weirdly is a running back. Like, they had a lot of plays that were short yardage plays. They got turned into longer yardage because of the closing ability of the Lions. Anyway, I'm officially late for work. So, on that note, I'm going to leave so that I can be less late for work. Thank you for everybody who tuned into this show. And also thanks to everybody who watched week 2 of the NFL season, so you can follow along. Hit me up on Twitter at FB_playbook. Hit me up on Instagram at TheAshtonForever. I'm out of here. And wash your hands, wash your ass. If you have access to a whole shower or a whole bath, please take one. Make the world a cleaner place. Later. Oh, big time late for work. Big time late for work. Guess we magically got a flat tire.